Why do so many psychics report past lives ending at the same age? It's not a glitch in memory. It's a sign of something much deeper, a hidden cycle called the loop. These are soul-level exit points, programmed by your subconscious fears, that keep dragging you back into reincarnation. But here's the twist. The astral plane isn't just some mystical concept. It's a system of traps with 7 layers pulling your consciousness like gravity. Most souls fall for it, but a few, ancient Egyptian initiates among them, found the escape key. In this video, I'll reveal the 3 exact meditative techniques they used to break free. If you care about what happens after death, and I don't say this lightly because this might be the most important thing you ever learn. Your body works like a cosmic radio antenna, constantly receiving and transmitting signals of consciousness. This isn't just poetic language. Ancient texts from Egypt to India describe the physical form as a temporary receiver for something far more permanent. The Bhagavad Gita compares the body to clothing that the soul changes between lifetimes, while Tibetan Buddhists speak of consciousness as a continuous stream that takes new forms. Modern physics hits a wall when trying to explain how consciousness moves between lifetimes. The hard problem of consciousness, how subjective experience arises from matter, remains unsolved. But the radio analogy gives us a practical way to visualize it. Think of your current life as one station on the dial. When you die, your consciousness keeps transmitting, just on a different frequency. Near-death experiences support this. Countless reports describe people observing their bodies from outside, hearing conversations in other rooms, or recalling details they couldn't have known physically. The quality of your reception depends on your attachments. Unresolved emotions and material cravings create static in the signal. A person obsessed with wealth might reincarnate into similar financial circumstances repeatedly. Someone terrified of abandonment could relive variations of that trauma across lifetimes. These patterns aren't punishments. They're the universe giving you more chances to work through what you haven't resolved. Advanced practitioners learn to change stations consciously. Tibetan monks practicing dream yoga demonstrate this by maintaining awareness during sleep and death simulations. The Egyptian Book of the Dead describes initiates navigating the afterlife with specific mantras and visualizations. These aren't supernatural powers. They're skills developed through training, like learning to tune a radio precisely. Consciousness itself has no form, just like radio waves are invisible until a receiver translates them into sound. Your current life is one expression of that eternal signal. The body provides structure and limitation, allowing specific experiences to manifest. Without this temporary vessel, consciousness would be like a radio station broadcasting into empty space, all potential with nothing to receive it. This explains why some souls seem stuck in repetitive cycles. Strong attachments create powerful, gravitational pulls toward familiar frequencies. A spirit attached to physical pleasure might repeatedly choose lives focused on sensory experience. Someone obsessed with power could incarnate into leadership roles across eras. The pattern continues until the underlying attachment is recognized and released. The transition between lives operates like changing stations on a cosmic dial. Most people do this unconsciously, pulled by their strongest cravings and fears. But those who train their awareness can navigate consciously. They recognize death as simply adjusting the tuner, not an end to broadcasting. This explains why advanced practitioners often describe death with anticipation rather than fear. They've practiced changing frequencies many times before. These cycles become traps when we mistake the station for the broadcaster. Identifying too strongly with any single lifetime creates the illusion that consciousness begins and ends with the body. In reality, you are the signal, not the receiver. Recognizing this is the first step in changing how you navigate between lives. The static of unresolved attachments makes it harder to tune into higher frequencies. Every grudge, every unprocessed trauma, every material obsession adds interference to your reception. Clearing these isn't about morality, it's signal maintenance. The cleaner your transmission, the more clearly you can choose your next frequency. Rather than being pulled back by unresolved business, this sets the stage for understanding the ouroboros, that ancient symbol of the serpent eating its tail. It's not just about cycles, but about how specific attachment points create gravitational pulls in the afterlife. Just as certain songs make you stop scanning the radio dial, these unresolved patterns make consciousness pause at familiar frequencies. The ouroboros appears in nearly every ancient civilization, from Egyptian temples to Greek alchemy texts, because it represents a truth about consciousness we've always known but rarely understood. This serpent eating its tail isn't just about cycles. It's a precise map of how awareness gets trapped in repetitive patterns. Most people see it as a general symbol of rebirth, but alchemists and esoteric traditions knew better. They recognized that the exact point where the serpent's teeth meet flesh corresponds to specific attachments that pull us back into incarnation again and again. Alchemical texts break down the ouroboros into distinct stages of transformation. The initial bite represents unresolved karma, those emotional debts we carry between lives. The digestion phase mirrors the afterlife review process, where souls confront what they avoided during incarnation. The tail's renewal symbolizes the moment a soul either repeats the cycle or chooses liberation. Modern psychology sees this play out in fractal time, how trauma patterns repeat across generations until someone finally addresses the root cause. Your recurring struggles in relationships, finances, or health often trace back to these unfinished loops, playing out like a song stuck on repeat. The serpent's curvature maps directly to the 7 astral planes. Each twist in its body aligns with a different vibrational layer of the afterlife. Lower coils correspond to dense attachments, material possessions, physical addictions, and unprocessed anger. Middle sections relate to emotional and intellectual fixations, like romantic obsessions or rigid belief systems. Higher curves represent subtler attachments of identity and spiritual pride. Even the direction of the bite matters. Clockwise suggests outward-focused karma, while counterclockwise indicates internalized patterns. This geometry explains why some souls progress while others stay trapped in familiar territory. You can spot your personal bite points through life patterns you can't seem to shake. Maybe you repeatedly face betrayal around the same age or hit financial ceilings under similar circumstances. These aren't random. They're your soul's version of a spiritual bookmark, signaling where you took an exit in past lives. Regression therapy cases show people recalling deaths at identical ages across incarnations, often with matching unresolved emotions. A soldier who died terrified in battle might face adrenaline-based challenges until they learn to process fear differently. The ouroboros secretly encodes methods for breaking free. Alchemical illustrations often show the serpent with key symbols along its body, stars at certain bends, crowns near the head, or chalices at the tail. These mark intervention, points where consciousness can step off the wheel. The solve et coagula principle, dissolve and recombine, appears in many diagrams, representing the need to fully experience attachments before releasing them. Trying to bypass them without processing just resets the cycle. Fractal patterns in nature reveal the same truth. Branching rivers and neural networks mirror the serpent's path, always cycling but never exactly repeating. Ancient Buddhists depicted this as the bhava chakra, where beings cycle through realms based on their dominant attachments. Modern physics sees it in time loops and quantum recurrence. The difference between being stuck and progressing lies in Whether you're running old scripts or writing new ones each cycle, when Egyptian initiates studied the ouroboros, they focused on the precise angle where mouth meets tail. This juncture holds the blueprint for unraveling personal karma. Like a seam in fabric, it shows where patterns connect and where they can be reworked. Your recurring life challenges likely trace back to such a seam, waiting for you to change. How you respond. The 7 astral planes map perfectly onto the serpent's form because they represent increasing refinement of awareness. Just as static fades when tuning a radio dial correctly, each plane lets you perceive higher frequencies by releasing lower attachments. The ouroboros reminds us that every ending carries the seed of a new beginning, but only if we plant something different this time. What makes this symbol so persistent across cultures isn't just its visual appeal. It mirrors an inescapable truth about how consciousness evolves. We don't truly break cycles. We outgrow them by recognizing their mechanics. The serpent keeps eating because we keep feeding it with our unresolved energies, not because it wants to. Understanding this distinction makes all the difference between spinning in place and ascending the spiral. The astral plane isn't one uniform destination. It operates more like a spiritual customs office with 7 distinct checkpoints. Each layer corresponds to different attachments that keep souls cycling back into physical form. Think of these subdivisions as vibrational layers that respond to what you carried with you beyond death. The lower layers mirror our most stubborn physical addictions, while higher planes reflect refined emotional and intellectual bonds. Where you land after death isn't random. It's determined by which of these layers hold the strongest pull for you. The lowest 3 subplanes act as holding patterns for deeply ingrained material attachments. The 7th layer, often described as a real hell in esoteric texts, is where those obsessed with physical cravings or violent tendencies gravitate. Here, perceptions of reality become distorted versions of earthly life, filled with shadows of unmet desires. The 6th plane houses souls, still tethered to worldly possessions or locations, unable to detach from favorite homes, businesses, or burial sites. On the 5th layer, you find those fixated on sensory pleasures, food, drugs, or compulsive behaviors that formed their primary identity. These individuals recreate ghostly versions of their addictions, trapped by the weight of their own cravings. Between the 4th and 5th planes exists what Leadbeater called the most crowded region, where ordinary people spend the majority of their post-death existence. This is the realm of unfinished emotional business, grudges held too long, loves never properly released, or family dynamics that still feel unresolved. The scenery here often resembles earthly life, complete with imagined houses and familiar faces, but with one crucial difference: every interaction is colored by emotional patterns carried over from life. Those who define themselves solely through relationships may remain here for decades, in Earth time, rehashing old arguments or reliving romantic fantasies. It's the spiritual equivalent of replaying old home videos instead of moving forward. The upper layers reveal a dramatic shift in consciousness. The 3rd plane introduces self-created environments, what some traditions call the Summerland. Here, souls construct elaborate thought forms, reflecting personal beliefs. Religious devotees manifest churches, artists craft galleries, scholars build libraries. Though more pleasant than lower realms, it's still a transitional space where individual identity persists through mental projections. The 2nd plane brings another pivotal transition point. This is where spiritual seekers often pause to examine their belief systems. Some get caught here too, especially those who clung to rigid religious doctrines without developing deeper wisdom. The highest astral plane remains the most mysterious. According to Leadbeater, it hosts those who pursued purely intellectual interests. Without spiritual growth, scientists or philosophers who dismissed anything beyond material reality. Interestingly, this plane also serves as the final purification point before souls shed the astral body completely. Here, consciousness begins remembering its true nature beyond any earthly identity. Those who reach this layer describe sensations of expansion, as though the last veils of personal history are finally lifting. Most souls linger somewhere between the third and fifth planes, zones that exert the strongest gravitational pull back into incarnation. Emotional wounds that never healed, relationships left unbalanced, or creative projects left incomplete all create drag that slows spiritual progress. The duration of your stay on any plane depends on the composition of your astral body, specifically, which layers of matter dominate its structure. Every unprocessed emotion, every buried fear, every unacknowledged desire adds density to certain vibrational layers, effectively anchoring you to those frequencies. This explains why people often reincarnate into similar life circumstances without conscious choice. The unresolved portions of your astral body act like magnets, pulling you toward whatever experiences can address those imbalances. A soul stuck with heavy fourth plane matter might return to a nearly identical family dynamic. Different faces, same emotional patterns. Someone carrying fifth plane attachments could manifest parallel addictions across lifetimes, cycling through variations of the same core struggle. The mechanism isn't punishment, it's physics. Energy follows the path of least resistance, and consciousness naturally flows where its vibrational structure resonates most strongly. The good news is that each layer has specific keys for moving through it, methods for purifying your astral body's composition before death even arrives. Working through material attachments in life lightens the lower plane's pull. Healing emotional wounds reduces middle plane density. Developing self-awareness helps consciousness navigate the upper planes more smoothly. Practical methods exist for addressing each layer systematically. Techniques the Egyptian initiates called knowing the assessors. When you address these astral layers consciously, you gain influence over where consciousness flows next. What really happens in those first moments after death determines everything about your next lifetime. According to esoteric traditions across cultures, the immediate post-death experience follows a consistent pattern, one most people walk into, completely unprepared. You detach from your physical body, often floating above it before moving through a tunnel or darkened space. This transition period holds critical turning points most miss because they're operating on autopilot instead of conscious awareness. Unprepared souls reflexively seek familiar attachments immediately after death. Just like someone quitting smoking instinctively reaches for a phantom cigarette, consciousness gravitates toward what feels known. People often report seeing deceased relatives first, not because those souls necessarily greet them, but because their own longing creates those visions. The strongest bonds and unfulfilled cravings shape this initial experience. Someone obsessed with wealth might find themselves drawn to their old bank, while another person fixated on lost love could wander their former home searching for a partner. These aren't literal locations any more than dreams are physical places. They're projections created by attachment. The life review process mirrors what addiction specialists call playing the tape through. Every action and decision gets re-experienced not just from your perspective, but through how it affected others. Arguments replay, showing both sides simultaneously. Kindnesses and cruelties alike ripple outward with perfect clarity. This isn't judgment in the religious sense, it's cause and effect made visible. The intensity depends on how much charge those memories still carry. Heavy emotional weight around certain events becomes immediately obvious, showing exactly where work remains unfinished. These charged moments become magnets for the next incarnation. Subconscious programs take over when consciousness lacks direction. Without conscious preparation, your next incarnation gets selected automatically based on dominant vibrations. A soul consumed by unexpressed creativity might get drawn to an artistic family. Someone who died terrified of poverty could wind up in similar economic struggles, not as punishment, but because that fear frequency remains unresolved. These subconscious bookmarks explain why people often reincarnate into parallel lessons. Across lifetimes, the process resembles how dreams cobble together fragments of daily life, except here it constructs entire futures from unresolved past material. There are intervention points throughout this process where awareness changes everything. The first occurs during the initial detachment from the body. Those practiced in meditation recognize this transition immediately. Another comes during the life review. Initiates watch with detachment, noting patterns without getting pulled into emotional reruns. The third happens when selecting new circumstances. Awakened souls approach this as conscious architects rather than passive participants. These moments separate those repeating grades from those advancing toward graduation. This explains why Egyptian initiates spent years preparing for death. They didn't fear the afterlife. They systematized navigation through it. Their daily practice of dyeing the cloth referred to gradually transforming the soul's composition through disciplined self-awareness. While ordinary people experience death as disorienting shock, initiates moved through it like skilled sailors crossing familiar waters. They left instructions carved in pyramid walls, not about burying treasure, but about preserving consciousness. Beyond physical form, modern near-death experiences unknowingly confirm these ancient maps. Many describe being stopped at certain thresholds until resolving unfinished business. Others report seeing energetic cords, tethering them to earthly concerns they hadn't released. These consistent accounts across cultures and eras suggest we're dealing with objective spiritual architecture, not subjective fantasy. The difference between liberation and repetition comes down to recognizing these structures before they shape your next existence. Now consider what happens when these preparation techniques get applied daily instead of only at life's end. When you review your day each evening with detached observation, you're rehearsing the life review process. When you notice repetitive thoughts without identifying with them, you're loosening their grip on future incarnations. The work happens now, not because death is impending, but because consciousness is always forming its next expression. This changes preparation from abstract concept to practical skill, one we'll explore through specific methods from the pyramid texts next. The pyramid texts contain specific meditation techniques designed to bypass the astral traps most souls encounter after death. These aren't vague spiritual concepts. They're precise instructions carved in stone by initiates who mastered the transition between dimensions. The Book of Coming Forth by Day outlines a threefold path: preparation before death, navigation during transition, and conscious rebirth. Modern scholars often interpret these texts as funeral rites, but their real purpose was daily practice. For the living, the Egyptians didn't prepare for death at life's end. They trained for it like athletes preparing for a championship event. The weighing of the heart ceremony wasn't just mythology. It was a sophisticated attachment assessment tool. When the heart, the seat of identity and desire, gets weighed against Ma'at's feather, universal truth, the scale reveals your soul's density. Heavy hearts meant dense astral bodies likely to get pulled back into material existence. Light hearts indicated enough detachment to move toward liberation. This wasn't a judgment by external gods. The 42 assessors represented aspects of your own consciousness that needed addressing. Each assessor corresponds to a specific type of attachment. Fear of loss, excessive pride, unresolved anger, and so on. Knowing their names wasn't about memorization, it was recognizing these patterns within yourself. These techniques appear mysterious until you understand the daily practice behind them. The dying before death meditation involved lying in sarcophagus, both each night reviewing the day's events with full sensory recall. Participants would mentally return interactions where they'd acted from fear or attachment, then replay them with neutral observation. This gradual detachment weakened emotional patterns that otherwise create afterlife baggage. Modern psychology confirms this method. Trauma therapists use similar memory reconsolidation techniques to lessen the charge around past events. The Egyptians were doing advanced inner work thousands of years before neuroscience existed. Masonic initiation rituals preserve fragments of this knowledge. The blindfolded candidate undergoing symbolic death mirrors the Egyptian soul navigating darkness after physical death. The compass and square represent measuring the heart's alignment with truth, direct descendants of Ma'at's scales. Even biblical texts contain traces. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also, hints at the attachment principle behind the weighing ceremony. These aren't coincidences. They're remnants of a universal science of consciousness that once existed across cultures. Practical application starts with nightly review. Don't just recall your day. Re-experience it while asking two questions. Where did I act from fear instead of truth? Where did I confuse temporary things with my real self? This simple practice begins the heart-lightening process. Next, identify your personal assessors, the recurring emotional patterns that distort your choices. Someone who always worries about money might work with the assessor of clinging. Another person stuck in toxic relationships would address the assessor of misguided desire. Naming these patterns weakens their unconscious hold. The deeper work involves conscious sensory withdrawal. Egyptian initiates practice stepping back from the five senses during meditation, not to escape the world, but to break the automatic association that says, "These sensations are me." Modern experiments with sensory deprivation tanks confirm this alters consciousness profoundly. You're not destroying the senses, you're recognizing their receivers, not the core self. This makes physical death less disorienting when it arrives. Adapting. These methods today requires no ancient languages or elaborate rituals. The core practice is awareness of attachments in real time. When you feel possessive about objects, notice it. When nostalgia or worry pulls you into the past or future, observe that tug without resisting. These moments are miniature weighings of the heart, countless daily opportunities to lighten your astral body. The Egyptians' brilliance was packaging profound psychology into simple, repeatable actions anyone could practice. The final piece involves what they called knowing the transformations, understanding that your present awareness already exists beyond birth and death. Modern physics points to the same truth. Energy can't be created or destroyed, only transformed. Your consciousness follows this same principle. The exit strategy becomes unnecessary when you realize no entrance or exit ever contained your true nature. This recognition doesn't come from belief. It emerges gradually through consistent practice of these techniques over time. The Egyptians left us not cryptic riddles, but a working manual for consciousness evolution. Today's challenge isn't accessing their knowledge, it's applying their discipline. Those repeating patterns in your life aren't accidents. The same relationship problems that keep surfacing, the career obstacles that reappear in different forms, the health issues that trace familiar paths, these are your soul's way of flagging. Unfinished business. Past life regression therapists notice clients often encounter pivotal moments around similar ages across different incarnations. A person who died tragically at 32 in one life might unconsciously create another crisis point around that age and the next. These are subconscious bookmarks, places where consciousness got stuck and now naturally returns to seek resolution. The age of return phenomenon shows up clearly in psychic readings. You might notice certain years of your life carried extra. Wait, maybe everything shifted at 28, or perhaps 45 became a turning point. These aren't random numbers. They often correspond to past life exit points where trauma or significant choices occurred. When that age approaches in your current life, you may feel unexplained anxiety, déjà vu, or a strange sense of familiarity with certain situations. This happens because part of you remembers. Even if your conscious mind doesn't, the pattern will keep repeating until you bring awareness to it. These recurring themes become default settings for future incarnations. Imagine writing a story where you keep using the same plot devices without realizing it. Your soul does something similar, recycling certain character types, challenges, and turning points across lifetimes. Past life memories retrieved under hypnosis often reveal people reincarnating into parallel circumstances. A medieval blacksmith becomes a modern mechanic. A Victorian-era suffragette returns as a women's rights activist. The roles change, but the core lessons remain consistent until fully addressed. 3 meditation practices can help rewrite these subconscious programs. The first involves time-specific review, paying special attention to periods corresponding to past exit points. If you sense significance around age 36, spend time meditating on that period in your current life, observing patterns without judgment. The second practice uses visualization to consciously redirect energy, imaging golden light, dissolving old bookmarks at their root. The third method incorporates mantra work with specific sounds that disrupt stagnant energy patterns at the cellular memory level. Regression therapy provides fascinating examples of these mechanisms at work. One client kept encountering walls in dreams and visions. Through past life recall, they accessed a medieval lifetime where they'd been trapped in a dungeon. The wall motif had carried forward as a subconscious metaphor for feeling blocked. Another case involved a woman with recurring nightmares about drowning, who discovered she'd experienced multiple water-related deaths across incarnations. The subconscious uses these symbols to get your attention. Practical work begins with identifying your personal repetition points. Look for life themes that won't let go. Situations where you think, here we go again. Notice ages when major shifts occurred or patterns emerged. Keep a journal tracking recurring dreams, unexplained fears, or intense reactions to certain places or historical periods. These clues help map your soul's sticky notes, the places consciousness keeps returning to for another attempt at resolution. The key lies in changing your relationship to these patterns. Instead of fighting them or resigning yourself to their inevitability, observe them with detached curiosity. That shift alone begins loosening their grip. When you catch yourself replaying familiar scripts, pause and ask, what part of me keeps creating this scenario? What remains unresolved? The answer might not come immediately, but the question disrupts the automatic cycle. Simple awareness exercises can accelerate this process. Try this. For 1 week, mentally note every time you react strongly to a situation, whether with fear, anger, or intense attraction. Don't judge the reaction, just observe it and ask when you last felt that same emotional signature. You might notice connections to childhood experiences or sudden intuitions about past lives. This practice starts revealing your personal reset points, the places where old patterns try to reassert themselves. Transforming these points isn't about erasing the past. It's about updating your relationship to it. When you approach recurring challenges with full presence rather than subconscious programming, you change their meaning. Suddenly, that age that once signaled crisis becomes an opportunity. That relationship pattern that kept disappointing transforms into a mirror showing what needs healing. The exit points remain, but they become doors instead of traps, leading somewhere new rather than looping you back. Advanced practitioners don't break cycles, they learn to rewrite them from within. Most people reincarnate through karmic rebound, where unresolved emotions and attachments automatically pull them back into familiar lessons. But those who attain self-mastery approach rebirth differently. They become conscious programmers of their soul's journey, selecting their next incarnation with intention rather than defaulting to past patterns. This shift doesn't happen overnight. It's the result of consistent inner work that changes how consciousness interacts with the cycle itself. The difference between automatic and conscious incarnation comes down to awareness. Typical rebirth follows the path of least resistance, like water flowing into familiar grooves. But when you develop the observer state, that quiet space within that watches thoughts without getting caught in them, you gain influence over the process. Tibetan Buddhists describe masters who achieve the rainbow body, where the physical form dissolves into light at death. These cases aren't just mythology, they demonstrate what happens when consciousness fully masters its relationship to form. The body doesn't decay because the practitioner has released all attachment to material existence. Daily review becomes the training ground for this level of mastery. Each night, instead of just recounting your day, try this. Replay 3 key moments where you felt strong emotions. Observe them as if watching a film, noticing where you got hooked by fear, desire, or identification. This simple practice strengthens the observer state while weakening automatic reactions that normally dictate rebirth patterns. Over time, you'll catch attachment formation earlier, that precise moment when a passing thought turns into something that could anchor you to future suffering. The observer state works because it changes your relationship to experience. Normally, when something painful happens, part of you solidifies around it like scar tissue. That dense energy influences what you attract next. But when you observe without fully identifying, experiences don't crystallize into karmic weights. Imagine 2 people going through divorce. One obsessively replays events with anger, while the other acknowledges the pain but doesn't let it define them. The first creates momentum for similar relationship struggles next life. The second leaves space for new patterns. Conscious incarnation isn't about controlling every detail of your next life. That would just be another form of attachment. It's about clearing enough static so your soul can align with its true trajectory rather than getting sidetracked by old business. Think of it like upgrading from riding unpredictable rapids to steering a sailboat. You still work with cosmic winds and currents, but you're no longer at their mercy. This work reshapes your entire relationship to death. Instead of an abrupt transition full of uncertainty, it becomes more like graduation, a conscious movement to what's next. Near-death experiencers who've achieved self-mastery describe something different from the typical tunnel and light scenario. They report a smooth, intentional transition where they recognize the process immediately and participate in directing it. That's the difference between being pushed by unseen forces and moving with awakened choice. You don't have to wait for death to begin practicing this. Start noticing where you habitually identify with thoughts or emotions in daily life. When someone criticizes you, watch how quickly "they hurt me" becomes part of your personal story. That internal storytelling is exactly what builds karmic momentum across lifetimes. The more you can observe these moments without letting them define you, the more you weaken their hold over your future. The ultimate goal isn't escaping the cycle, but becoming its conscious participant. Even advanced souls may choose rebirth, not because they have to, but because they want to contribute from a place of clarity. That's how the loop transforms from prison to playground. Instead of repeating lessons you didn't learn, you engage with them creatively, bringing wisdom where it's needed most. Now consider what it means to approach life with this perspective in mind. Those challenges you face stop being random misfortunes and become part of a curriculum your soul designed for its own growth. The people who trigger you aren't just obstacles, they're mirrors showing where you still get hooked. Every moment becomes an opportunity to loosen the cycle's grip or reinforce it. The choice isn't really about future incarnations, it's about where you place your attention right now. This brings us to the most practical question. How do you start programming the cycle rather than being programmed by it? The answer lies in those small daily moments where you remember who's truly in charge of your consciousness. That's where all real change begins, not in dramatic gestures, but in quiet shifts of perspective. The loop only persists as long as you forget. It's a loop. Recognition is the first step outside. The loop only exists until you recognize it's a loop. That moment of awareness changes everything. It's the first step outside the cycle. Think about your own life patterns, that relationship dynamic that keeps repeating, the career challenge that surfaces in different forms, the health issue that follows a familiar pattern. These aren't coincidences. They're clues pointing to where your soul might be stuck across lifetimes. I'd love to hear which patterns you've noticed. Share them below. Your realization might help others see their own exit points. For those ready to go deeper, I've linked a free astral navigation guide. Remember, your next incarnation begins with the choices you make today.